So I want to start with talking about the importance of the Trump voter out there, the coalition that President Trump put together of working class and middle class families from across the America's Rust Belt, and throughout America's heartland, are some of the people that are forgotten most in Washington, D.C. And I want to see what it is that you're going to do in the White House Communications Director position to focus on making sure those voices are heard, those people are talked to, because sometimes it feels like people in Washington forget about those folks. And so that's where I want to start, and then we'll get into some of the specifics of some other policy issues.
Did you send your job application form in yet, Matt? I was looking for it yesterday when I started. I didn't see anything. Do you need my email so I can get your resume over here?
Well, Anthony, I'm honored. Maybe we can talk about that later. But
I think, in all seriousness, I think one of the things that Breitbart has done is you've captured the spirit of what is actually going on in the country, where there's a large group of people that for whatever reason, and we can go over all of them, have been disaffected from the economic franchise. And so one of the most successful things about the president is that he has a vision for those people, but he also identified that way earlier than what I would call the typical politician who really wasn't focused on it. And so what I'm going to be doing over there is bringing staff in and developing messages so that we can go out there and reach the people that need the most help in the United States. And so do you have time for a quick story? Or I can tell you,
absolutely. Take your time. Go ahead.
I'm in New Mexico. It's one of my first campaign stops with the president. We're on then Trump Force One. We land in Albuquerque. We go over to the Albuquerque Civic Center. Matt, I take my Secret Service day pin off. And I go behind and around the security perimeter into the crowd. There's 8,000 people there. I'm shaking hands with these people. And then it dawns on me, oh, my God, these are the people I grew up with. These are blue-collar, middle-class people who are shifting into the lower class because of some level of economic desperation. Factories have been shut down. Opportunities have been lost in these little towns. Since NAFTA, we've lost 70,000 factories in the United States.
Right.
And so it was the president, and this is one of the most, I think, the most admirable things about him. It was the president that showed me, who grew up in a middle-class area like that, what was actually going on in my hometown. Matt, I was spending too much time trying to spiral my way up into the global elite. You know, I went to some fancy schools, and then I worked at Goldman, and then I was trying to make myself some money to become financially independent. And I missed it. And so it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate to get reconnected to that and to help the president help those people.
Yeah, no, and that's really interesting is your particular story, right, is that you come from humble beginnings, and obviously people know you now as Anthony Scaramucci, the former host of Wall Street Week, the founder of Skybridge Capital, right? You're worth millions, and you're a very successful Wall Street financier, but again, you didn't come from that. It's not like you were born into the political or the financial elite.
Well, my dad worked for a crushed aggregate business out on Long Island. He started out as a laborer, which was an hourly wage job. Then he worked a payloader and a heavy crane. As he got older, he went into a dispatching position. And then as he got even older, they gave him a desk job eventually in that company. And so he spent 42 years at that company. And by the way, and this is a big symbol of America, the middle class wages, those labor wages were high enough so that we could have a very affordable lifestyle. Yes, there were air conditioners going in and out of the windows. There were Schwinn bicycles and plates of macaroni on Sundays. I remember my mom and dad having a fairly tight budget. Neither one of them had gone to college, but through his work effort and through his labor, we had a very nice lifestyle. I don't want anybody ever to think I grew up poor. I would never dishonor my dad by telling people that I grew up poor, but I did have to get some, financial help and loans and so forth for school, like most Americans. And so for me, what troubles me now is I actually priced my dad's wages in 2015. So his 1975 wages would have been down 45%, Matt, in real economic terms. So I just want you to think of the magnitude of that. Through no fault of my dad's, a guy that was willing to work a 60, 70-hour work week outdoors, in all 4 seasons, he would have had a harder time affording the lifestyle today, say in 2017, than we were living in 1975. So this is something I've talked to the president about. This is something the president feels tremendous amount of empathy for, and we're working on a combination of policies. Before I came on the show this morning, he just called me from Air Force One. He's with Stephen Mnuchin. And so we're running a couple simultaneous tracks, fix the healthcare situation, reform the tax code, and start to set up the manufacturing building blocks of success that can move the real income numbers up for these people.
Yeah, and that kind of sets up my next question really well, is that, again, the focus of the Trump agenda has always been on trying to get people to the point where, as many people across the country as want to can achieve the American dream. And that's why the things like healthcare, tax reform, and so on and so forth are so important. The regulation rollbacks that we've seen over the course of the beginning of the administration, and then also the immigration enforcement stuff, so that America is first. The healthcare and tax reform have kind of been stalled a little bit in Congress and the bureaucratic annals of Washington. How do you foresee getting those things going again? Obviously, the Senate's kind of on hold with healthcare right now. How do you get that through to the finish line, get something done on healthcare, and then get moving on tax reform?
Well, very, very complicated question. So I don't want to overly simplify it by giving you a quick answer. But I do think that we can improve our messaging in a way where we create groundswells in those districts. And so people in the respective districts, both Democratic and Republican enclaves, if we can get the message out, I think it's a pro-American, nonpartisan message. And there's a lot of unanimity and appeal to what we're doing. And so what I'm hoping with the right communication strategy, Matt, we can get that message out there to what I would call the heartland and to the people themselves, and then create a groundswell where those people who are disaffected from the Congress — I think the Congress has a lower approval rating than Kim Il-jung, something like that. The legendary John McCain, who I wish a great return to health, once said that we're down to paid staff and our family members as it relates to our approval rating. They said, John, you may only be down to your paid staff. I don't think the family members like you guys anymore. My point is, we've got to get the message out there, and we've got to get the message to lift the congressmen and the senators to do the right thing for the country. And I believe we can do that. These things are very, very complicated. It was 40 or 50 years working on health care legislation, didn't go anywhere. President Obama had a 60-person majority in the Congress. It took him 22 months. The president has already gotten something through the House. He is close on the Congress, meaning the Senate. And, I'm optimistic. I think we can get something done. And listen, it may not be a perfect bill, and we can talk about what's going on inside that bill, but that's what goes on in a Republican democracy. You're going to have to give and take a little bit. But we got to get in a better direction than we're in right now, because you and I both know, I can give you the statistics. Somewhere out there in 2019, 2020, the current Affordable Health Care Act, the way it is configured, is going to start to implode on us. And that'll set up a crisis that we really don't want to be involved in.
So another thing, Anthony, that the Trump base out there is very, very excited about, a lot of people voted for him, and they're a little bit upset that they haven't seen a lot of action on this front. And I know the president's working hard on this, but is a border wall. When can we start expecting the bulldozers to start heading down there to start building the border wall? Tell us a little bit about where we're at on that front.
Yeah, and so I'm going to apologize on this one, because I haven't met with Secretary Kelly yet. I know the president has it in his budget. I know this is one of his campaign promises that he is on missile lock to keep, Matt. But unfortunately, yesterday was my first day on the job. Yeah, what you're asking me is on my agenda. If you invite me back next week, I'm sure I can talk about it with more depth and detail. But here's what I will say. We have a list of campaign promises that are up on Steve Bannon's wall, and we're going right through those campaign promises, and so that we can tell the American people that we're citizen politicians or citizen public servants. We're not career politicians or establishment players that just want to sit in Washington and milk the system. And what we want to do is here are the things that we promised you, and like good business people, we're going to deliver on these promises. And try to make the system better. So the wall is at the top of the list for the president, and so I can assure you that it's going to get done.
All right. And Anthony, the last thing I wanted to ask you about, and this came up a little bit yesterday during your first briefing there at the White House, is the bias that exists there in the media, the fake news. Obviously, we've seen a number of tweets this morning from President Trump again, calling out the fake news. How do you plan to combat that? I know you were a victim of fake news on CNN very recently, probably one of the biggest journalistic scandals in history, if not the biggest, and they still haven't been very transparent about it over there. But ultimately, how do you plan to combat fake news in the leftist bias in the media? Well, listen. I mean, the good news is that we've diagnosed the problem, and you've also been a great help in terms of exposure. And I do appreciate what you did for me during that incident that was taking place. I want to thank you publicly in front of your listeners. But here's what I would say to you. And I had this conversation with the president, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing it with your listeners. What we have to do is we've got to refine the message. We have enough outlets, whether it's Breitbart, the president's social media feed, all of the different apparatus that we have where people will allow us to deliver our message to the American people unfiltered. If we can tighten up that message, and we can expand the throughput of that message, because the president's message is a very compelling one, I think we continue to win. And we were talking about this yesterday in the president's study off of the Oval Office, where I said, okay, yeah, we're having a rough time with the mainstream media, but last time I checked during the campaign, we were having a rough time with the mainstream media, and the people see through it. And I don't know if you saw the press release yesterday when he announced me as the communications director. His comment was, we're having a rough time with the mainstream media, but the good news for all of us is that the people really see through it, Matt. So my goal is to continue to penetrate through that shell, and hopefully over time, too, to be candid, because it's a fresh start, to see if we can do something to de-escalate some elements of that media bias, and see if we can, get a little bit more objectivity and a little bit more fairness in the system, because you can look at it objectively, frankly, and see that it isn't fair right now.